All right. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Wednesday. And if it's Wednesday, it's for real, for real. We totally need like a whole little thing. We don't have it. That wasn't it. Don't judge us.
Yeah, somebody make a thing for us.
We are accepting all artistic contributions to continue this effort. Okay. So, today, so much has happened in popular culture and like in the world in the last week. So, um, there's that. The one that we are choosing to speak about today is the Britney Spears documentary by the New York Times. So I don't know if you've seen it. I saw it. Lucy didn't see it. But the overarching...
However, I have always been it's Britney, bitch. Always. Okay. There's till this day, no one has outdone her VMA performance, I'm a slave for you. And yes, was it complicated to be a Black person being talking about I'm a slave for you? Absolutely. However, Britney at the height, nobody was touching your girl, and I'm gonna just leave it at that.
Well, and that actually came up in a documentary where it's like at the time when boy bands were at its peak, where R&B was at its peak, where like male rappers were at its peak, you had Britney Spears like literally dominate, right? And so it's very interesting because a lot of her quote unquote public unraveling is deeply, deeply rooted in misogyny.
Hello,
like, really,
hello.
I guess 12-year-old me did not see it, obviously.
Even Name a powerful woman who's been brought to her knees, level to the ground, and there is always some raggedy daddy, some raggedy partner, some raggedy male figure afoot.
Speaking of raggedy male figure, so the key point, the key turning point, I mean, I think there are multiple raggedy male figures in this narrative, but raggedy figure number one is Justin Timberlake, who literally spun this media narrative that she was the one who did something to him, had her dragged. This is where her whole Jezebel narrative really, the media and the documentary really highlights this, like just really took that narrative and ran with it. And she never even engaged, right? Like she never like confirmed or denied. She just like kept it cute and mute. And they just like went as far as to say, is this who you want to be your role model for your children? And like this is also like these are two Disney kids, right? Like these are people who we grew up with. And so it was interesting to see that like online, Justin Timberlake is having a very bad week because everybody is dragging him because he has a consistent pattern of
consistent.
I mean, hello, we just had what do we call it? Janet Jackson Appreciation Day, aka
right,
the Super Bowl.
Right, like, where he gets dragged every year consistently by Black Twitter every year. Because last year or the year before, he was caught kissing someone that was not Jessica Biel, and he had to apologize.
Also,
and like he is a philanderer. He has a history of being a philanderer. He is actually the one who cheated on Britney and spun this whole narrative. And I have to say, I'm gonna have to come clean. There was a time where I used to be obsessed with Justin Timberlake's music. Not that it was good, because I always used to think that if you took any Justin Timberlake song and you made Anthony Hamilton sing it, that thing would just hit like on a different level, right? But I would at that time I was going through a producer phase, and I was obsessed with Timbaland, and Justin Timberlake just made beautiful music and had beautiful synergy together. And so that's why I was really into Justin Timberlake. But he just has a history of, because not only did he disrespect Janet after the whatever, he also went on to do some other stuff. I think he disrespected Prince, whatever. Like he just has a history. It's like, this is an entitled white man who just be doing the most and who is a patriarchal terrorist. And I just want us to never to forget like what he did to Britney.
And he has never faced any accountability for that. And so I think like, you know, the chickens are coming home to roost, and I don't feel
And they frying them things, honey. Justin Timberlake. Oh, I don't see how Justin Timberlake is gonna serve. I don't see how he's gonna survive putting out this decade, right? This decade coming out with black influenced music. He may just have to stick to the hee haw, keep making hee haw music. Like his last album, I think was very,
by the way.
But but you know, I mean, but when black people get information, and most black people are Team Britney. Like that's just on period. Like most of us,
and if they weren't, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Okay.
Come on now. So between Janet Jackson and now we got the full receipts on Britney. Good luck, boo. Good luck. Not even Timberland could resurrect that thing. I don't know, but we'll see, y'all. Stranger things have happened.
And you know, it's so he, and a lot of stuff has come out about him being problematic in terms of just how he treats staff, how he treats people in hospitality and anybody. Like he has a very strict, like you can't look at him, you can't talk to him directly, you have to talk to his assistant for his assistant to talk to him, and then he responds. Like just a really nasty stuff. And I also feel like come on, Jessica Biel, give us something. Like are you okay? Like what is, because as a person who, like, she was at the prime of her career and like dating him and getting dragged by him, like dogged out by him, and then ends up marrying him and all this stuff. Like I feel like there's something more there too. I was a big Seventh Heaven person. So listen, I was like,
we just gotta accept that a lot of women themselves are handmaidens for the patriarchy. And I actually think Jessica Biel, the mere fact that's who you're choosing to partner with, he's embarrassed you several times. I'm just gonna assume that the gender liberation analysis, Jessica Biel probably doesn't have one, which is why she is in the marriage that she is in with the man that she is with. Because if that would have been my husband, I would have made him many Super Bowls ago apologize about the Janet Jackson thing. So the mere fact that this man still what would it cost Justin Timberlake if he were to apologize now? It wouldn't be a negative.
He could literally do it right now. He's trending. Just like.
So it's just like it literally would help his career if he did. And so again, to me, it's just like I just have to assume like she a patriarchal terrorist too. She don't care. She don't care. So you know, I hope one day she could be like Katie Holmes and run for the hills. Until then, you know, I'm going to expect and accept that Mama is making her decisions from a free place. You know, this is a white, thin, rich woman. She don't have to take no disrespect if she don't want to. So, you know, whatever, child. I'm gonna leave it at that.
I mean, there's also that. Like I have no defense for that.
Yeah.
So I mean, for those inquiring minds who want to know, the other person who is basura is her father, because it is very clear. Britney Spears' father. He literally did nothing for her career. Nothing. He wasn't her manager. It wasn't like a Jessica Simpson situation where he was her manager and did all these things. He didn't do crap jack. Nothing. Except spend his money.
Mama.
Yes. And even like the mom, so the mom, yes, but like they had hired basically like a chaperone for her, so like they actually continued to live their life as she was left out into the world to like navigate all of this by herself. Basically, it's so like you see, like there is this balance between like wanting to nurture your child's talent and like their passion, and you can like this is her passion, right? Like this is, I mean, it right. You know, it is like soul filling for her,
right?
And that is from her own mouth, right? So not
right.
What we're projecting onto her. But like they've really, really profited off of her. And so like child exploitation is a thing. Like I've been like trying to unpack.
Big, huge.
Like, is it really ethical? Like how much of this is ethical? And then the fact that like you have someone who has, during the time of her her being under the legal control of her father as a person nearing 40 with 2 children who has earned over $300 million in that 12-year span. So you're telling me I can produce, I can perform, I can go on world tours, I can have a residency in Las Vegas, I can visit my kids, I can clothe myself, bathe myself, feed myself, whatever, and I can perform on demand for you, but I don't have the legal authority to make decisions for myself about myself, and particularly about my money. Like, that was what they really did not want to let go of in terms of the conservatorship. It really is, in this case, about the money, right? And so, and you could even have a boyfriend. Like, she has a boyfriend. So I'm like, she is of sound mind enough to do all of those things, but oh no, but not her own money.
Yeah, and it's her money to blow, right? Like, if it's her money to blow. So tell me, like, so is she over her money or no?
No, the judge let her add somebody to the list of conservators, but did not remove her dad, which was what she wanted.
Okay, well, I mean,
so like,
dang.
He's literally still profiting off of her. And it's just weird because, like, we are not K-Fed fans. I'm not a K-Fed fan. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna say I am not a K-Fed fan.
I'm not trying. Why would I be a K-Fed fan?
I don't know.
Don't do me like that.
But we didn't consult about this beforehand, so you know.
Okay.
So the fact that, like, he's been vocal against her father and, like, has a restraining order against her father on behalf of her children and her is, like, alarm bell. Like, the fact everything. That, yeah, like, there's somebody who doesn't even have a vested interest in your well-being being like, yo, that dude, not good, not a good look.
And where's her mama and her sister?
So that is what is very strange to me, is that Jamie and Jamie Lynn and the brother, like, where are they in this entire process? Okay, like, besides profiting, because obviously her sister got a whole career off of her being famous. Okay. So,
ooh, Chile. Well, okay. Well, this sounds like some Honey Boo Boo mess. Very similar to the Honey Boo Boo mess.
Like, and it's clear that, like, this is from a journalistic perspective. They're like, nobody has authorized this. This was right. Like, the New York Times did this thing and their own investigative journalism. So, like, take that also in terms of, like, your sourcing. It's what is public knowledge and who they've interviewed and stuff like that. And there are interviews in there. Also, it just shows that, like, 90s, early 2000s, the last part of this section
wild
is where, like, we're gonna, like, shift to that of, like, we were talking up, like, before hopping on, we were talking about Diane Sawyer being utter trash, and she's also getting dragged since this came out.
And Barbara Walters getting dragged a little bit too, because her stuff is getting pulled up. I am actually shocked as we are relitigating Diane Sawyer and Barbara Walters, and I have to say, I'm actually prior to the relitigation, definitely Team Diane. I've just never understood why Barbara Walters was whatever. Like, I didn't see anything in her interviewing acumen. Not to say Diane had what is a better interviewer, but, like, I really didn't see it for Babs, right? Just could not, and especially The View killed it for me. Just didn't see it for Babs. But as we're relitigating the 90s and the early 2000s, y'all, Diane Sawyer and Barbara Walters were asking inappropriate questions, and more specifically, they were disrespectful and condescending to Black elite folks. Like you're talking to Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston, and yes, we can all argue that Whitney was lying about quite a few things, and God, Diane is not, girl, you're not the woman probation officer. Diane looked like she was getting ready to ask her to go pee in the cup. What is going on, Jesus? Go ahead, girl.
Sorry, I'm trying
No,
So
it was disrespectful. It was disrespectful. It was disrespectful. And okay, I know I said to talk, but my final comment is these people were not talented. What they were was white. These people were not talented. Because when I look at the journalists who I love, Christian Amanpour, Andrea Mitchell, Tamron Hall back when she was doing the Newsy News, Soledad O'Brien, these are very serious journalists who straddle the lines, who know how to ask very personal questions and keeping people's dignity intact. And we just had an example of when Tamron Hall was interviewed. What's our boy who ran for governor?
Andrew Gillum.
Andrew Gillum around his bisexuality. Like it wasn't tawdry, it wasn't disgusting. She wasn't dumpster diving. And I'm just like, I just cannot believe that there's a history of overpaying people who are not even good at their job. Like I remember when Matt Lauer was being brought down to his heels, I just remember thinking, on top of all of the disgusting things and this fact that this man had a button at his desk to trap you in his office, what I kept remember thinking is like, why is he paid so much? What does he do? Why does he do it, quote unquote, so well that he is paid so much? So there is just a history in this country of white journalists who are okay at best, getting paid goo globs of money. But when you start to relitigate and look at all of their stuff and you make a reel of their interviews, they're awful. Like people in undergraduate communications department can do better and ask more rigorous questions in a better way.
And I think that like this documentary really had me interrogate my, like, I don't know about you, but I like romanticized the early 2000s. Like I really like, that's like my nostalgia is like the 90s and the early 2000s. Also thinking of like life before 2000, before 9/11, and the internet. Sorry, y'all. Sorry, Gen Z. We do remember we're old enough to like not have had the internet at home, or a smartphone. So I really, looking back, have just seen how problematic all of these people were, like how they like spoke to people. And Oprah used to get so much slack for being like enthusiastic and empathetic and all of these things, and like that was unprofessional, right? Like that she was less of a journalist. So she came from like a through and through journalist, right? That like the fact that she would interview people with empathy and like comparatively a way big amount of respect, right? Like a larger amount of respect, that like that was somehow less than. But while there are issues with Oprah, what you
yes, ma'am,
wanting back the tape and seeing you're going to like literally badger this young woman and make her cry on national television.
And girl, you would have thought you would have thought Justin Timberlake was Diane Sawyer's son or nephew. It's just like, ma'am, you literally have picked a side. You have picked a side. What is going on here?
And so yeah, so it's definitely interesting to go back to that time and see what like the norm was, and also just how you were saying, just like how Jessica Biel is probably a handmaiden to misogyny. I believe that like Diane Sawyer and Barbara Walters are definitely
our handmaidens, yes.
Like, yeah, really propping up misogyny. And that's one of those things of one of the reasons why systems and like cultural norms like this exist, is because we have folks that are complicit and active participants in upholding these systems of oppression and violence. Because we always got to bring it back to the real.
For real.
It's for real. So tonight's topic is I was spicy with it this week. I said your faves were Caribbean. So it is Black History Month. Okay, we have not explicitly spoken about Black History Month. We're Black all day, all night,
365.
For
it's Black Future Month every day over here.
Over here, right? Constantly thinking about our people. But in honor of Black History Month, we are going to be like digging a little bit deeper into some conversations that we should be having as a community. And one of the things that sparked, I mean, well, Lucy knows that I'm passionate about making sure, like, of uplifting the stories of Black immigrants and particularly Caribbean folks as a Haitian American person. I always look to see myself in history, right? And I think that it's human nature to want to see yourself reflected in narratives that impact your life. So, unfortunately, Cicely Tyson had passed last week. And one of the things that was circulating around the internet as we were commemorating her life and uplifting all of her accomplishments was that she is from Nevis. So she is actually Caribbean American. And most folks know that or did not know that. I learned that on Twitter. Thank you, Twitter. It was verified. So it's not just like a Twitter rumor. And I think about how so many folks in our culture, whether it's political giants, theorists, liberators, like folks that have an active role in American history, not just Black history, Black American history, are actually Caribbean. I'm not saying that like, oh, because Caribbeans do it better. So like, don't get in your feelings. That is not what this is about. But I think it like for me, it's great to be able to have a connection. So like one of my personal guideposts is Shirley Chisolm, who was also like first generation Caribbean American like me. And as a person who works in the political space and the policy space, to have that perspective and to have somebody as an example who has been able to achieve things with the same sense of, or I mean, I'm not gonna say the same, I'm the same as her, but with integrity and with a perspective. And so, Lucy, I'm gonna stop the spiel on why we did this topic. I've defended myself enough.
Yes, because my unbossed sister, right? One of my North Star is Audre Lorde, and Audre Lorde is also first generation Caribbean American. And Audre Lorde, when I read the book Zammy at age 18, that was the first time I saw myself. And so y'all know how I feel about representation, but the only realms in which I think representation matters is when it's about Black people seeing Black people for ourselves, and not about Black people being presented to white people in a very specific kind of way. And so when I found Audre Lorde, and I have found Audre Lorde at several very crucial points in my life, it's just so amazing to know that this is a Caribbean American person. Like, that matters. And so, but there's a way in which when we talk about these giants, they get folded into African American history, and I wonder why that is. And obviously, I understand we're in North America, and I understand that Black American culture is more prevalent in a very specific kind of way. But like something you said before we got on this call that's important. If we are going to do the hard work of moving past unity and moving towards solidarity, Caribbean Americans have to see themselves implicated in the plight of African Americans, and African Americans have to understand the plight of Caribbean Americans and the role we've always played. And when we think about Shirley Chisolm, Audre Lorde, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Kwame Toure, and when we think about these people who helped shape Black feminism, Black liberation thought, resistance and all those kind of things, the fact that these people were hyphenated and came from other places, places that were majority Black countries, and they came here and they were able to add so much to the liberation struggles here, that is a clear indication why our anti-racism must always be internationalist, and our understanding of Blackness must always be global, because they speak to one another. So when Haiti liberated itself from France, the world purposely ignored the Haitian Revolution, did not talk about it, did not write about it. Hegel, when he was writing all of this stuff around personhood, this, that, and the sovereignty, all those kind of things, the things that we consider the foundations of liberal ideology of the Enlightenment, of thinking and all that other stuff, whatever. Like, they purposely ignored Haiti for a very specific reason, lest Black people here in North America get too big for their britches and see a possibility role model in IET, and then start to really cause even more trouble, because we know people here were already resisting and subverting and rebelling all the time. However, what would it have looked like if everybody who was enslaved here knew that, wow, their kin back in IET did the impossible, right? And so this is why I just think it's really important, like, that Blackness is not a monolith. We say that all the time, and then we collapse all Black people together and erase their Caribbeanness, and that's not exactly cool.
It. That's exactly it. And I think that so there, I mean, like, I have a whole bunch of different thoughts on this, but firstly, when you come to the United States and you are, and like, whether you're an immigrant, a refugee, when you make the decision, right? So if you are willing, and we can debate what is willing, but when you come to the United States as an immigrant, or you immigrate here, you have to go through a process of assimilation, whether that is, obviously you have to first understand your context and navigate and integrate and understand how you can get things done. And there's the language issue if you are not English speaker and all of these things, but that added layer of Blackness, you are automatically, unlike, for example, Asian immigrants, right, who are perpetually considered other immediately, like, no matter how many generations deep they are on these lands. For Black immigrants, you are automatically considered to be African American, regardless of your experience, knowledge, understanding of African American culture and history. Mm-hmm. So I think that has always been the rub of, like, people are treating you as something that you know nothing about. And it's not that you don't know about Blackness, because you know about Blackness because you've been Black your entire life, right?
Right.
And obviously anti-Black racism also exists outside of the United States. It is global, just like Blackness is global. So it's not to say that you haven't experienced prejudice, and you assume a certain level of xenophobia because you probably don't speak English, you may not speak English. So, like, that's baked into the equation. But when you are socialized as a certain thing that you have no real understanding of, that I think is where the harm happens, where then you get to buy into the negative narrative about African Americans, and then you work doubly hard to say, I'm not like those people, because you don't have the context, you don't have the understanding to really know what you're rejecting. All you're doing is reacting to something that is being imposed on you externally, right? I think also, where, as a person who tries to really focus on how we can bring Black immigrant and African American communities together, I spend a lot of time thinking about this. And I think the key thing is to be able to how do I say, assume the best intent, number one. That's, like, just a general principle of understanding and dialogue. And I think the other is to do the work of actually having increasing your consciousness and understanding about place in the histories that you're entering. So I always think of Black History Month as a great opportunity for non-African American folks to learn more about African American history, rather than just simply say, like, either I erase my other identity to assimilate into being African American, because that is the way that I'm going to be able to navigate and survive, which is one integration path for Black immigrants. And the other is to thoroughly reject the African American community and hold strong to my identity to say that, like, oh no, I'm not like those people, and I'm not what you think I am, right? In a more negative connotation. And so I think that if we're actually able to see ourselves in African American narrative, right? Like, when we think of Malcolm X and Kwame Toure and Shirley Chisolm and Audre Lorde, they are key parts of African American history, and they're accepted in African American culture. And I think, wouldn't it be great if we could actually say, oh yeah, and by the way, yeah, they were Caribbean too, like, so that people then felt included in the narrative. So it's not like, United States history is not something about, like, oh, what happened here that was before me that doesn't matter, right? it's actually something that my people and people from my country have actually been actively a part of. Like that was the way that I interpreted that when I learned about like the story of my family is that my uncle and Shirley Chisolm were the best man and maid of honor in a wedding in Queens because and so like my uncle always say, oh, I knew Shirley Chisolm before she was a cop. Like I think she was running for Congress at the time or whatever, and it was always cool like to see that like there was that connection. And I think one of the ways that we can bring Black immigrant communities and Black American and African American communities together is to be able to not just talk about what we have in common in terms of like our Blackness, which is infinite and lives have been dedicated to it, many lives, our lives as well, but that we can actually make room for the nuance. Like that is the thing, is you get to be both. You get to be Black American and Caribbean American. You do not have to choose one or the other. And so let's stop erasing that. And it is something that is consistent even to this day. There are plenty of people who are doing badass work that I admire that like their Caribbean identity gets erased, whether willingly or unwillingly. So I also think that we could do there could definitely be a deeper dive in regards to like Pan-Africanism, as you were saying, rooted in the hyphenate. And I think so one of the things that I love about Black people is their ability to imagine the impossible or what is deemed impossible and making it happen. And I think that we forget that a little bit of the ingredient in like the Afrofuturism or in that liberatory theology is examples of Black people thriving in other places. Right. And the through line is that like actually folks that were involved in shaping a liberatory politic actually knew what was possible. Like right. They actually had examples, right, of what was possible.
Yeah, I just and I think we have to bring in the fact that white supremacy in this country does profit and does a really good job of placing a wedge between Caribbean Black folks and African American Black folks, right? I don't know how many times I've tacitly have heard or has been said that oh, Haitians are better, you work harder, you're smarter, you're better workers, this, that, and the third. And there was a time before I was grounded in my politics that hit me the wrong way, but I wasn't quite sure why that hit me the wrong way. And obviously now that I have the right, it's anti-Black as all get out. And so we have to do the work now as people, especially as first generations, to like really call that into question and to think about like because there is not going to be if there's no future without Black people, there's no future without Blackness. And if Blackness is a galaxy and it's vast, we must make space for all the ways in which people come to Blackness. And we are all not African American in a very specific kind of way, right? There are some people, and even that African American, that has its own connotation when you meet an actual Black person from the continent of the continent who's here. Like, okay, so my new favorite artist is Tobe. Is that his? Okay. Ooh, chop. Ooh, girl, he's so whatever. And I'm like, oh my God. So this man is Black, first generation Nigerian American from the South. I was like, your intersections match my intersections. Can we intersect? Whatever. But and so again, so even that, right? What like my mind is always blown when I do meet a Black person from the continent who is first generation, thinking about African American in that context, and thinking about African American in the enslaved, the chattel slavery context, and then thinking about me who's Haitian American and like who I don't disavow my African Americanness because I like Black American culture specifically had a big hand in shaping my Black identity, and obviously Haitianness too. And so I'm constantly having these conversations about like all of these intersections and how they form our politics and our identity. And I just think we don't need to shy away from the messiness. We have way more tools now. We have way more language, and where we need to get to, actually, it's required that we do this hard work. Because I do feel a kind of way when Audre Lorde is mentioned, and her Caribbeanness is completely erased, because it was a central point of, like, her Caribbeanness was almost like a character in the book Zammy. It was a big deal to her. It was a big deal to her to be right, to be queer and to be talking about her queerness and be talking about all the ways, like, that whole story is about Caribbean migration and how Black people were trying to make their way in this oppressive, ugly society after living in a land in which, not that it was hunky-dory, not that it, manna was raining from the sky, but like, it was a different context. And so we got to be with our context, and Black people are complicated, are complicated, and we need to be with our complications as we have serious conversations around how we're going to do anti-Black violence, how we're going to go after our sovereignty. It's just going to be important. It's 43 million of us in the United States, at least at the last count of the census. We are not all African American. What does this mean for us? And I want to close this comment by saying it behooves non-Black people of color and white people to understand our differences in our context, and don't lump us in a very specific kind of way, because it's harmful. Because there are moments where people lump you in a way and it makes you want to choose. And sometimes for the good of the group, you do choose, but it's just like, but at my detriment though, like, because I am 100% all the time Haitian and American. It's not a part-time thing.
Right. And I think that my little editors know, if you get one thing out of this particular conversation, is if you're talking about Black people and you don't know their actual ancestry or their heritage or their cultural identity, just call them Black.
Come on, somebody. Come on, somebody.
Like, actually, the word Black is fine. And you will not offend anybody by calling them Black American.
Yeah, because African American assumes you know people's origins, and you just being loud and wrong, boo boo. Loud and wrong.
Loud and wrong. That is like one of my pet peeves. So I also think that and this has been my own like journey in life thus far, is like, you try to, by making people choose an identity, it's like we're forced to be palatable to other people. Because God forbid people take the 0.5 seconds it takes to listen to my sentence about, like, my parents were born in Haiti. God forbid there actually be that understanding of like a person's hyphenates. Like, so what do? You're just like, oh yeah, I'm Black. Or, oh yeah, like, somebody identifies you as African American, you're like, okay, whatever. This is not the hill I'm gonna die. I am the person that is gonna die on that hill, just so you know, every single time. But don't always want to be that person. But I think that for Caribbean American folks and for Black immigrant folks, like, just like you don't anglify your name, like, don't freaking like erase your identity and your heritage just to be acceptable to white people or to other folks. Like, it's okay. And it's just weird to me that, like, it's something that, like, my mom dealt with when she was, like, growing up, to, like, I dealt with, like, my little cousin, like, it is still an issue, like, 60 years later, of, like, when there was the first official big wave of Black immigrants, of specifically Caribbean immigrants, coming to the United States in 1960. So I think that this also, like, the fact that I highlighted that, like, your faves are Caribbean, is that people assume that if you do have a heritage that is not African American, that it's like, oh, you're a recent arrival, when actually this like Black migration to the United States, willful migration to the United States, has always happened. Like the people were coming from like free people particularly were coming to the United States, and people were leaving. Free people in the United States were leaving and going to the Caribbean. Like that migration pattern is as old as time. Just like we know folks like Black folks from the Caribbean and Indigenous folks from the Caribbean had been coming to Turtle Island forever, right? And so it is not to say that like immigration is as much of a Black thing, right? A Black process, a Black identity as anything else. And it's not to say
that's key
for immigrants. They are not. What I'm saying is that there were people that were actually immigrants who willfully migrated to the United States all throughout history.
And that's key because I feel as if, okay, so you shared a very interesting thing with me earlier. So we're in the middle of Black Futures Month, right? What was one of the first things the Biden administration did is deport Haitians. In the middle of Black Futures Month, after we survive an insurrection and all of this stuff, I don't know. I just feel as if Black Caribbeans, Black immigrants, Black undocumented folks get enough love from anybody, get enough love from African Americans, get enough love from the Immigrant Rights Coalition. It's just like, but at the same time, when you look at who's getting swept up by the police, who's getting swept up by ICE, it is Black folks. It is Black undocumented folks. And because Black undocumented folks, Black immigrants tend to live in Black African American enclaves and communities that are over policed, we are getting swept up. We are getting caught up in the carceral system. And I feel as if I don't hear, it is not being underlined and underscored enough how, obviously for those of us who are serious abolitionists, we make these whatever, like how ICE and police work together, and how it has Black people caught up on both sides. Whether you were born here or not, you're gonna get caught up, you're gonna get swept up. I remember at the height of like the deportation, I, who am born and raised in the United States of America, I started thinking to myself, well, if I got stopped by the police and they asked me, am I an immigrant? Am I a citizen? I have no paperwork that in my wallet, casually, that says I'm a citizen. I remember I was fooled. At the time where it was like, don't answer your door. People wasn't going to church. It was whatever. And I was just like, and I'm smart. I feel like I could talk myself out of anything. However, I was just like, I really do. But at the same time, I was just like, well, if I'm Black, I'm a citizen of these nations. How do I prove that I'm a citizen of these nations? And so I just remember thinking like, yo, like, because again, as a kid, I've always known about immigration, right? Like always, right? And so it's like when you're first generation, you know, I know there are stories about my family being undocumented at some point that I need to uncover and unearth. But like, it was a lot of stuff about like, yo, somebody knock on the door, they look white, don't answer, don't ask no questions, no this, that, and the third. And it wasn't on some like, oh, the social worker's gonna come and take you. It was on some like, that might be INS. That might be, and at any given moment, our house was open to someone who was coming from Haiti, who I'm sure, looking back at it, was very much undocumented. So I say all of that to say, it's just like, I just feel as if when you live at the intersection of being an immigrant, being first generation, being undocumented, and you're Black, I just feel as if we're not really highlighting and uplifting how precarious that intersection is, and all the ways that we need the immigrant rights movements. We need more Black Lives Matter talk around that. And I know like part of the demands of Black Lives Matter, there is an immigration demand. However, I want to see more of that lifted up in our mainstream discourse, because there seems to be a disconnect. Like Black people cannot be immigrants. in a very specific kind of way. And that way, if you are Black and you are an immigrant, you don't have a socio-political consciousness. And this is like wrong on all fronts.
Right. And I think that there is this assumption, this like really hit me as you were speaking, that like Black people in the United States don't have a foreign policy analysis. And that is what, like, I live at like the what is domestic is foreign, like domestic policy and foreign policy are one and the same to me because I am Asian American. And I've always had to have a foreign policy analysis. I have always had to understand how the State Department works. I've always had to understand how OAS works. I've always had to understand how the United Nations works. I've always had to understand the alphabet soup of all of the folks that are involved in foreign policy and international development and humanitarian and human rights and all these things, because that is not a luxury. That is like the reality of the people that I care about, whether it's in the United States or in Haiti or in other countries. Because also like folks don't just all immigrate from point A to point B. Like I have family in Canada, I have family like in a whole bunch of other places. So I think that with the erasure of people's hyphenate as Black immigrants, as Caribbean folks, there is this assumption of ignorance around what are the things that we should be experts in as the things we experience. And actually, I am an expert.
Come on, poli-sci professor. Come on now, give us the poli-sci. Give us the poli-sci.
But it's true. Like you have to understand. For example, things are disintegrating in Haiti right now.
Jesus,
because of the quote unquote president who's not constitutionally the president. Yeah, I am going to throw that in there real quick. Prove me wrong. Read the Haitian Constitution. So you have to understand that, okay, what the Biden administration says versus what the Organization of American States says. And then like maybe if you can get like somebody on the UN Security Council to say something, like you have to be aware of all these things because it is our flights leaving from Miami to go to Port-au-Prince tomorrow, right? It's right. Will you be able to, like, if I send this in the mail, is it going to get there? Or as a person, when ICE was removed the last time, I was living in Haiti. I spent high school in Haiti. I took my SATs in New York. I got stuck in New York for 3 weeks. Why? Because he got kicked out, airport closed. I was stuck, right? Like things that, like, luckily I was able to do that as an American citizen, chilling at my aunt's house. Like the world didn't end for me. But it is a reality of the Black immigrant experience, and particularly the Caribbean experience, because we are so close, and the United States is all up in the business.
All up in the business, right? Because again, thinking about all of the atrocities the UN committed against Haiti by bringing cholera to Haiti, all of the atrocities of the soldiers and how they have created, how they were allowed unfettered access to sexually abuse Haitian children in Haiti. So these, I'm thinking my entire life, I've had to low-key be a foreign policy wonk, right? Like real talk, thinking about like hearing about kidnappings, like the fact that people talk about Mexico, there have been many times, and we can argue maybe now too in Haiti, that's looking very similar to Mexico, where the kidnappings in Mexico are so bad. There's a whole ass underground economy to support the thing that unfortunately exploits people whose people have been kidnapped. And so I say all this to say
people who have family in the US, right? Like that is a part of the business model. Is
right.
Like actually folks who, like who has a family member in the US will pay the ransom money, is the logic. So again, it is a lived experience that requires people to be an expert in their own experience. So when we erase that, what are we doing?
Yeah, so we need to have, so it's just like, how do we tie TPS to the Black liberation struggle? How do we talk about foreign policy to the Black liberation struggle? This assumption that Black people's affairs are only domestic, it's just, like as you said, it's just so disrespectful. And well, y'all president made a gaffe and said, what he said? Black people are not, what he said? Are not monolithic?
I'm out of my mind, okay? Because I was
okay. something that was so ridiculous. And it's just like, are you trying to say black people are not diverse? Okay,
yes, that is what he said. That is what he said. You know, I literally paid the voter registration that day. I was like, done. Over y'all.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, I want us, this year has to be the year, and consequently going forward, as we are vastly approaching soon we're gonna blink our eyes, is gonna be the summer, and soon we're gonna be celebrating, unfortunately, a year of these uprisings around George Floyd. We have to be able to chart how did our analysis change, how did it get sharper, how did it get crisper, and I want to hear people who are talking to Black people also talk about global Blackness, and that most Black people are connected to Black people who are outside of these United States, and when the United States sneeze, it causes a tsunami wherever our people are at, which means we have a vested interest in what happens here and what happens over there. And we're talking about remittances, things of that nature. Like, my question is, with COVID-19 and all the ways in which it's devastated people economically, and the fact that women have been just completely wiped out, decimated. They said, like, women are now, it's looking like we're back in the 80s in terms of all the gains that women made economically have all been wiped out by COVID-19. And when we think about the fact that who makes remittances, like people who are here who send their money over there, that tends to be Black women who are CNAs, who are nurses, who are domestic workers, and all those kind of things. And so it makes you think, and think about Filipino folks, everyone, because it's not just us, right? Thinking about, like, what is the fact that a lot of our people cannot work? What is it doing to the economies of these other countries, of our people that we're supporting? So again, we have got to be talking about Blackness from a global perspective, and Black people do have domestic and international wants and needs and interests. And again, to be anti-racist is to have an internationalist lens, period. And Angela Davis told us that.
And so, I mean, for a fact, we know that, remember, the pandemic is not just happening to the United States.
Hello.
Right? So the other thing is that there is a COVID crisis back home. And so folks are not able to generate money locally, and they are not able to get the income coming in from remittances. So it's literally economic disaster. So you think we have a recession? Look outside of the United States and look to Latin America and the Caribbean. And you see the, like, utter economic devastation that is impending, which is partially why, like, Brazil is imploding. Which is also why we've had economic pressures for a year, and we're seeing a lot of destabilization in the region because of that. Because you have a slowdown in remittances, and you also have folks that were mandated to stay home, just like there were stay-at-home orders all across Latin America and the Caribbean too. Because again, United States is the center of the world. We are not the only person dealing with this. I want to say that it is, as you like to say, Black Futures Month, and for me, I am fighting for a Black future where people don't assume folks' identity. So we have made so many gains in terms of gender expression. In terms of gender and gender expression and gender identity and sexuality. I think that it is beyond time that we do that for folks' identity, and not assume that because folks are Black that they're from here. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No,
like, take the time to actually ask the question instead of making assumptions, and we'd all be better for it. And you might learn something too.
And even the whole "you're from here," right? So
that's enough.
And thinking about, like, right, and, like, understanding, like, being a Haitian American and being a Haitian who newly arrived to the United States, that's a different context, right? Or, like, for instance, Haitians in Miami differ from Haitians in New York, differ from Haitians in Boston, differ from Haitians in Chicago. Like, you are talking about very vastly different Haitian people, yo. Like, don't get cut. Because,
those are no problems.
Don't start no problems. And also thinking too, African Americanness is not monolithic, right?
Exactly.
Black folks from the Bay differ from Black folks from the Deep South, differ from Black folks from the Midwest, differ from Black folks from the East. So it's like we have to really think about like we again complicate your understanding of Blackness and respect the fact that you don't know everything about Blackness, even if you are Black. Even if you are Black, like you leave room for magic, leave room to be educated, leave room to be in awe, because we have not settled everything that needs to be settled about Blackness. That is a lie, boo boo. That is a lie. That is a lie. We are just child. Oh God. Oh, thank God I'm Black is all I'm gonna say. Y'all should try it next lifetime. Don't Rachel Dolezal though. Don't Rachel Dolezal.
I mean, I was like, but not now. Not this time.
But not now, boo. But like, no, and like the assumption, because the majority of us have darker skin and have a very particular kind of hair texture, that like everything there is to know about us has been settled. All the questions have been answered. That is anti-Black. That is racist thinking. And please disavow yourself from that. It's not helpful. It's simply not helpful. And like right now, as we're in the middle of Black Futures Month, I implore you to make yourself available to the beauty and the vastness of Blackness. There's no bottom to Blackness. Like, keep swimming, baby. There's no bottom.
So with that note, I'm like, Black is infinite. What can I say? Happy Black Futures Month. And stay tuned. We already actually have our next 2 topics lined up. So definitely sign up and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.